As with any big-budget project, the Harry Potter television reboot, as put out by the rechristened Max, is already the subject of debate and controversy. Everyone has their ideas on how the show should be handled, if they want it at all. And this is compounded by the fact Harry Potter has already been adapted into films, all of which were well received. We live in the age of the reboot. Everything from Percy Jackson to Twilight is being remade, though in the case of the former, there's some justification. Fans were disappointed in the Percy Jackson films, and have long craved an adaptation which was faithful to the source material. Unlike Percy Jackson, though, the 8 Harry Potter movies have become iconic in their own right, with stellar performances from old and new actors alike, incredible set design, beautiful costuming, faithful writing, and so on. It's hard to beat what came before. We have the performances of the late actors Alan Rickman and Robbie Coltrane, as well as the work of the original Golden Trio, as played by Radcliffe, Watson, and Grint. Harry Potter marathons are as frequent and ingrained in our culture as Netflix and chill, and the films help to establish much of the look and feel of the wizarding world. That said, beloved as the movies are, they're not perfect. While there's plenty to praise, the very fact they are films puts them at a disadvantage. Owing to the need to stick to strict runtimes, a great deal of content was cut. Everything from Peeves to the many subplots involving ghosts and house elves had to be glossed over, which sometimes resulted in less complex storytelling. The story of Barty Crouch Jr., for example, had to be vastly simplified in the film. And we miss out on seeing Friends the Centaur become a teacher, or Dobby working in the Hogwarts kitchens as he tries to comfort the distraught house elf Winky. All this is to say nothing of the few complaints fans had. While there aren't many, people were unhappy with how Ginny and Ron were portrayed, at least in some instances. Nobody faults the acting of Rupert Grint or Bonnie Wright, but many felt both Weasley siblings were dumbed down. The fiery Ginny was relegated to tying shoelaces, while many of Ron's finest moments were stolen by Hermione. Taking all this together, the reboot will be a chance to address the areas the films got wrong, or were forced to ignore. Every character will be more fleshed out, simply from the luxury of an extended runtime, and subplots will be woven in, many brand new to those who've only watched the films over the years. At the same time, the movies did more right than they did wrong. And while changes are inevitable, there are certain elements unique to the films themselves which should be carried over into the reboot. These 5 elements, while small, are iconic and so recognizably a part of the Potter brand that it would feel wrong not to have them. Before we continue, I'm Riley and this is Otherworldly Fiction. On this channel, I rant about fantasy books, discuss characters and lore, share my bookish opinion, and offer the occasional writing advice. If any of that sounds like your cup of butterbeer, hit that subscribe button. Posts are on Fridays. There are plenty of things the TV show will need to add or change from the movies, making the reboot justified in my opinion. But there's just as much the films did well, and these are 5 aspects of the movies which should be carried over into the Max adaptation. Number 1. The sets. There is nothing more recognizable to Potterheads than the locations. The most notable, of course, is Hogwarts, but other key areas include the Barrow, Gringotts, and Diagon Alley itself. Though keeping close to the descriptions within the novels, the movies still help to establish what Hogwarts looks like in our heads. The films gave us the common rooms, the Room of Requirement, the Forbidden Forest, and so on. Plus, other stories within the world, such as the various video games, have continued to use this look. While Hogwarts Legacy made its own alterations to Hogwarts, such as to the Forbidden Forest, or in adding new areas, the castle is still recognizable as being the one from the films. Other games, like Hogwarts Mystery or Magic Awakened, have also maintained the overall look. Therefore, if these stories are to be taken as canon, then the Hogwarts within them, along with any other locations, should be treated as canon too. At any rate, people just know what the world of Harry Potter looks like. They know how Dumbledore's office is supposed to look, as well as the Great Hall. They know what the common rooms look like, as well as the overall look of the corridors. Though some slight changes are expected, there isn't any reason to fix what isn't broken, or to change what fans have come to expect. The TV show will still have to be creative, as they'll need to add in areas not yet seen, like the kitchens, or the room where Nick holds his death day party. But many areas can, and should, stay the same. The creators might even reuse old sets or locations. They could potentially film in the same space for Dumbledore's office, for example, or access the same castles they visited before to capture close shots. At the very least, the overall aesthetic should remain the same, not only because that's what fans expect, but because the look has been extended into other properties within the wizarding world. Number 2, the design. Tying into the sets, there's the overall look of objects, props, and clothes. Though certain things changed throughout the films themselves, with wizards going from a Charles Dickens style wardrobe to a more modern vibe for their robes, most elements were largely consistent. For example, everyone knows what a Hogwarts letter is supposed to look like. Each character in the series has their own distinct wand, which people can purchase when they head to Harry Potter themed venues. And prop makers are responsible for how we picture the Marauder's map, the Golden Snitch, and school uniforms, to name a few examples. I'm not saying the new set designers shouldn't be creative, especially in cases where the films deviated from what was described in the books. But the look of costumes and props has gone beyond the films. It's extended into video games and items you can literally purchase for yourself. In visiting merchandise stores, you can buy Bellatrix's wand, for example. There's an established look for objects within the brand itself, and there's no reason to reinvent everything just for the sake of doing so. Certainly, there can still be creativity, especially when it comes to the costumes. After all, outfits will need to be adapted to the new actors portraying the characters. Even within the films, we saw looks change to complement the actors themselves, with Dumbledore's wardrobe shifting when Michael Gambon took over the role from Richard Harrison. The creators might decide to make some changes to better reflect the books too, such as having the Hogwarts students wear their hats more, or having Fudge carrying his lime green bowler, to say nothing of all the other wild outfits characters wear throughout the series. At any rate, the aesthetics should stay the same. Costumes and other objects will be altered or updated, but certain things like the school robes or the wands of individual characters should stay the same. Number 3, the score. How much or how little the new creators choose to use the old score will be up to them, but I'd be happy with whatever route they choose to go. The first route, of course, would be to keep the score, drawing from all 8 films to include songs the fans are familiar with. The second route would be to keep a few songs, mixing them with brand new scores, while the third route would be to have entirely new compositions to set themselves apart. Personally, I feel they'll probably go with option number 2. They'll write new pieces, but they'll retain a handful of familiar songs. They'll want to be distinct from the film franchise. At the same time, they would be foolish not to capitalize on people's nostalgia. And the Potter score, as laid out in the films, is, like the sets and design, a part of the brand itself. At the very least, they might tease fans with trickles of the score, with 5 familiar notes that play before blending into something new with a similar sound. This was the case with Hogwarts Legacy, as, while the game had its own soundtrack, there were moments, if you listen carefully, when you could catch echoes of the main theme. Of course, Hogwarts Legacy was its own story. Therefore, it made sense to separate it to some degree, as the characters and events don't relate to Harry himself. This reboot, though, is Harry's story, and so including the songs from the films makes more sense. If nothing else, the creators should keep the theme song, which is titled Hedwig's Theme. Even across the films themselves, which shifted in tone, the theme appeared in some way. In early movies, it was bright and exciting, promising adventure for the whole family, while in later movies, it was slower and moodier, matching with the dampened color palette. But the song was always recognizable, and a part of most openings. Think of the opening to Chamber of Secrets versus Half-Blood Prince, and you'll see what I mean. Both intros are drastically different in tone and look, but all include that familiar jingle. Hedwig's theme is flexible. It can be altered, slowed, and mixed with other songs, making it a piece that's familiar for fans, but one which the creators can make their own. Number 4. Old actors. Obviously, there will be a new cast. It goes without saying that the original kids can't reprise their roles, unless they choose to do a cameo in the 19 years later scene. And some who might have been perfect to return, such as Robbie Coltrane, have passed on. Some actors, like Maggie Smith and Michael Gambon, could technically return, but the reality is that they'll likely be too old to take their roles on again, unless they only pop in for the first season. Even if they're still alive by the time cameras are rolling, they might not want to commit to such vast projects. And there hasn't been much news on the show since it was announced. That said, what I personally love to see are cameos. Other productions, when remaking a story, have had actors return, usually to play the parent of the character they originally portrayed. For example, the stepmother from Parent Trap went on to play the same character's mother in the reboot. And I'd love to see Harry Potter do something similar. Harry and James famously look like each other, so why couldn't Daniel Radcliffe take on the role of James Potter? Even if James only has one scene, mainly his appearance in the Mirror of Erised, I'd love to see the new Potter looking into the mirror back at Radcliffe. That would just add a whole other layer to an already touching moment. In fact, I'd probably cry, but in a good way. 2 other actors I'd kill to see return as their own fathers are Rupert Grint and Tom Felton. Rupert Grint is a father in real life, and he's tackled other quirky characters. Moreover, Rupert Grint has already made the transition to television, and so is comfortable in the medium. Seeing Rupert Grint as Mr. Weasley would be amazing. Even if they make Mr. Weasley closer to his description in the book, giving him a bald pate and glasses, I honestly feel Grint could pull that off. As for Tom Felton, the characters of Malfoy and Lucius are already quite similar. Tom has had plenty of time to practice his sneers and arrogant manner, making his transition into the role of Lucius natural. At any rate, I'd love to see a handful of cameos. In all likelihood, the cast will be brand new, especially as regards the kids. But having a few old faces come into play, smaller characters, would make for a wonderful homage to the work that came before, while still allowing the reboot to be distinct from its predecessor. Number 5. The Hedwig transitions. It's a small thing, but I'd love to see the new creators take advantage of the Hedwig transitions. Though more prevalent in the earlier films, they were a simple but extremely effective way to denote the passage of place or time. Transitioning from fall to winter, such shots would follow Hedwig as she literally drew the viewer into another season. These shots not only showed more of Hogwarts, but of Hedwig as well, reminding viewers of her continued presence in Harry's life, even if we didn't get to see many scenes that involved her directly. If they wanted, the creators could lean into this aspect more than the filmmakers did, maintaining these transitions all through Harry's years at Hogwarts, before abandoning them entirely in Season 7. Hedwig's loss is already wrenching, but if these transitions suddenly stopped in Deathly Hallows, it would show so much thematically, not only the end of Hedwig's life, but the end of Harry's childhood and his time at Hogwarts. Such transitions would bring us closer to the owl too. With an extended runtime, we can already expect to see more scenes with her, including the ones where she bickers with Harry or is affectionate towards him. But more Hedwig can never be a bad thing. In scenes where she's truly gone, such as when she's trying to deliver a letter to a faraway Sirius, we could really feel it, as the absence of her transitions could make us miss her as much as Harry does. If the creators wanted to get really creative, they could even segue a transition into a scene, having Hedwig sweep from a season change straight into a room where a scene is taking place. We might even see the moment in Order of the Phoenix when Hedwig is grabbed by someone from the Ministry. I can only imagine the shock viewers would feel if one of these familiar transitions was suddenly disrupted by a pair of hands grabbing the owl. It would make for a great jolt, to say the least. All in all, there's just a lot of potential in bringing back the Hedwig transitions. They're familiar as a part of the series, they bring viewers closer to Harry's beloved owl, and they could be utilized in so many ways, providing jump scares or blending scenes together. In conclusion, I will always love the original films, though they had to cut a great deal of content and could have improved on some aspects, like Ron's character. They got more right than wrong. From the set design to the score and the cast, the films helped to establish Hogwarts and the wider wizarding world as we know it, be it the castle or other locations like Diagon Alley or Gringotts. The look of the series, as laid out in the movies, has become the bedrock for other stories, including the video games. The look of the films has influenced merchandise, theme parks, and artwork. Much of what the movies did is synonymous with the Potter brand, making it a no-brainer that the creators should use or at least tap into what's been done before. The reboot will undoubtedly include its own moments of creativity, and changes can be expected, but it goes without saying that you shouldn't fix what isn't broken. Whether it's the inclusion of old actors, the design of the locations and the props, the famous score, or just the panoramic views of Hedwig sweeping over the castle, there are plenty of elements which should be carried over from the films. What aspects would you like to see remain from the movies? Are there elements on this list or otherwise that you would like to see change? Let me know in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like and subscribe. And if you want to hear more of my opinions on the reboot, including why I think it should be made, click one of the videos that's on your screen right now. As always, thank you for watching and happy reading.